Hi, my name is Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. On this channel, we talk about all things music ed, especially ways to switch things up in your classroom so that we are meeting kids where they are in the hopes of inspiring lifelong musicianship. Today, we're talking about how to create a lesson plan, how to plan your lesson. So I'm actually not talking about format like on paper. I'm talking about conceptualizing, thinking, and planning what you're going to do with your students. This is aimed more towards students in grades K, 1, and 2, but can certainly absolutely apply in the upper elementary grades as well. I'm also going to invite you to watch the video in conjunction with a little mini sort of work packet that I have linked below. It follows the structure of the video. It also gives you a few more specific examples of particular lessons that you can use, as well as gives you a sort of outline of how you can go about planning a particular lesson of your choosing. So like I said, it follows the format of the video, and it's got little like prompts and boxes and templates for you to use as you plan your specific lesson. You're definitely going to want to grab that. So link below. I'm going to get started. Before we dive into, lesson planning, I'm going to give you a few tips about how to go about just planning in general, short and long term. Just so, you're not too hyper-focused on the micro details and you're thinking a little bit more macro, because if you're so focused on the details from week to week to week to week, you may not be able to think as long term, and that might hinder you in the future. So let's start there. Content. What do you do? What do you do with students? What do they do? Well, okay, you've got the basics, right? You've got things like beat, rhythm, singing, instruments, movement, play, creativity, expression, things with manipulatives like scarves or popsicle sticks, things that get students being a musician from day one, which does not necessarily mean we are reading music, we are singing from octavos, we are being super formal. It can be way more casual than that, especially in the elementary grades when students are just discovering things that they like and enjoy. And let's face it, at this point in their lives, in their school careers, they need that building up. They need that positive inspiration, that positive association with things, so that in the future they think, this is for me. My thing with students is that I want to encourage them to be lifelong musicians. So what I mean by that is in 20, 30, whatever years, they're still conscious of the positive role that music plays in their life. I want it to be relevant. I want it to be fun. But I want to throw in engaging challenges along the way. And that's the tricky part. How do I put all of that together in one box in each lesson? Spoiler, I don't. I can't do all of that every single lesson. It's more of an arch. So that's again why I want you to think a little bit more broadly and long-term when you're planning a lesson. You might say, the first 2 months we're going to focus on this. The next 2 months we're going to focus on this. Or you might go by weeks, 4 weeks of this or 3 weeks of this, then 3 weeks of this. We have sort of this overarching theme. Like we're going to focus on singing. And then we're going to do some stuff with instruments. And then we're going to, because especially if you're trying to build a curriculum from scratch or even like from a backbone of a curriculum, it's going to be changing. It's not going to solidify, I think, for some time. When you are deciding what you want students to learn, either in a specific lesson or over the course of maybe 2 or 3 lessons, you want potential for diverse ways of learning and practicing the skill that you're teaching. Things like movement, like play, like doing things in small groups versus whole class. So you have this basic idea of what this should look like, the curriculum or the arch of your year. Let's just focus now on, okay, I've got that. How am I going to plan a day? How am I going to plan a single lesson for my students? What do you want your students to practice? What do you want them to know? There are so many things. Pick a thing that you're going to focus on, and we're going to build around that. I'm going to just use an example today that I use with kindergarten, and that is the lesson of musical opposites, specifically around the book Mortimer by Robert Munsch. For the Mortimer lesson, we're going to focus on musical opposites up and down, because in this book, there are characters who go up and down stairs. Okay, musical opposites. What do I want students to be able to do with that? Do you want them to be able to hear it? Do you want them to be able to show it? The answer is yes and yes. You want them to be able to hear it and show it. Something that you have to have in your lesson that's going to be the clincher is that the thing that you're teaching, you need to have evidence that students have practiced it, learned it, progressed through it, and then they can show you what they have learned. Okay, so you're going to teach musical up and down with the book Mortimer. Okay, great. But you have a 45-minute class, so you're really doing a book for 45 minutes. No, I would say, okay, that's the meat of your lesson. Now you have to fill in the gaps, especially like the opening, and then what's going to tie everything up in the end. The opening, the beginning part of your lesson, of your class, can be a routine or just a fun activity that's maybe between 5 and 7 minutes that really maybe doesn't have anything to do with your lesson content. Students thrive on routines and continuity. So if you want to start maybe every class for 4 weeks moving to the music of this genre or this composer or this band or this artist, that is another sort of broader overarching thing that ties everything together. So we don't have a bunch of these discrete, just random, what's going on? Students thrive on that routine. So if you want to start every class with something like movement, or quiet listening, or something with scarves, or something with a ball. Expectations for what they're doing have to be set, but don't think that it has to be related to your lesson goal. It can be something that is more of a routine for them that kind of draws them in, gets them in the musical mindset. It can be hard to stay consistent, but the more consistent you are with the way you structure your classes, the fewer behavioral issues and management issues you're going to have, because students know what to expect. They start to push boundaries when they don't know what to expect, when they don't know what to do when they come in, when they don't know what you want them to do. And it's not malicious, it's just the way kids are. So I would really recommend picking a routine and starting your classes with that thing for several weeks. It can be the exact same thing virtually every week. Repetition, don't be afraid of repetition. I was afraid of repetition for many years. I thought it would be boring and annoying. Kids like repetition. If they see you once a week, it's going to be brand new to them next week again anyway. So you got your opener, your 5 to 7 minute warm up, your musical sort of draw in kind of thing. Okay, the next 5 to 7-ish minutes, this is where you need to just have reflected a little bit. Can you zoom out from that specific skill you're teaching? So musical opposites, up and down. Can you zoom out and take a broader goal that encompasses that and start practicing that with something fun or silly or, that gets them moving around? So for example, if I'm doing musical up and down as my lesson, that's an opposite. So I'm going to zoom out and take the concept of opposites and do something with that. I do this a lot with students. I borrow a lot of this equipment from my PE teacher friend, but what we do is we do a listening game where I set up hula hoops around the room on the floor, one for every student. And I say, okay, I'm going to play some slow music. And when I play slow, you're going to walk around slowly. But when I suddenly play fast, you have to jump into a hula hoop, only one person in each hoop. So it's about listening, it's about moving, it's fun, it's engaging, and I switch the opposite pairs. I switch, okay, we do one sound, two sound, or we do loud and soft, or we do, whatever. And we play that, we do that for, maybe 7 to 10 minutes. I don't know, it kind of just depends on your structure, but it gets them listening and thinking and moving. And that is your big concept, right? Opposites is that bigger thing that later is going to zoom in to focus on just one. So recap on that little part. The second part of your class zooms out from the material you want to teach, that specific skill, and takes something a little bit bigger and turns it into an engaging activity. Kind of, I guess, like a hook to get students understanding, what are we listening for? What are we doing today? This is where I'm going to explain today. We're going to learn how to listen for musical up and musical down. What do you think that means? They may not really be able to understand that yet, but by the end of your class, they're going to, right? They're going to have heard it, they're going to have practiced it, they're going to have identified it, maybe even played it themselves. So as I'm reading the story, I've got a barred instrument next to me, like a xylophone or a glockenspiel, and I go up, stepwise up and down. I might even turn it so that it's vertical, so students can see it looks a little bit more like a staircase or a ladder, and they can visually see up and down, because left to right might not really click in their heads yet. Now remember at the beginning when I said, keep your routines the same, generally from class to class over a span of time, so students know what to expect. It's the same thing when you start your main learning activity. If students don't know what to do, you're going to get, again, some maybe behavior issues, some acting out or disengagement because they aren't sure what to do. And you might think, especially with an example like this, where you're going to read them a book, it's obvious they're going to listen to the book. But there's more to it than that, right? Of course, there's value in just having a book read to you. But because we're in music class and because we're learning about musical up and down, they have other things to do as you're reading. They have a job to do. And that job might be, something like, today I'm going to read you Mortimer. And you have a job as I'm reading Mortimer. Your job is to listen for musical up and down. And when you think you hear it, when you think you hear the music going up, I want you to raise your hand. And that's their job, like one little tiny job to do. And if they don't get it the first time, you might prompt them, but get them engaging in your story. Get them engaging in the thing that you were teaching, either through hand raising or through turn and talks or through physically manipulating things like on the floor or passing something around. Giving them a job to do while you are teaching the content is so important because it gets the information to stick a little better and it makes the learning more fun. So the next part of the lesson is where they're going to practice and show their learning. So what I'm going to do is that same opposite game from before, but this time I'm going to use up and down. And they're going to have to jump into a hoop if it's down or jump out if it's up. Or we might get rid of the hoops and physically climb upstairs when they hear up and then climb down. I guess this is more like a ladder, but upstairs and downstairs when they hear the musical up and the musical down. So same activity, they've already done it, just we're focusing on this more specific skill that I've taught and that they've they've gotten to know through the book. So that's basically my assessment. And I'm not looking for every student to have understood necessarily. I'm looking for students to practice the skill and show me what they're learning. There are all kinds of ways that you can show assessment, but the main formula for your lesson, content that you're teaching, should be that sort of presentation of the material and engagement of the students, followed by some sort of practice. And that practice can even be broken down further into, I'm taking the I do, we do, you do concept. We practice, you practice. So what you could do is even split the students into pairs and have students retell the story or make up their own version of the story with a character who's being really loud upstairs and has to keep getting yelled at by all these people. And they switch being like the storyteller and the instrument player, where they're telling the story to each other and they're playing the instruments that show up and down. And meanwhile, you would be circulating and checking in. Getting to know your students through these different activities and ways of engagement is also really vital, because then okay, so I'm going to introduce this lesson this way with that class, but maybe this way with this other class. And it's the same content, it's the same skill or skills, but it's a different way of presenting. And I know that seems like a lot of work and thinking. It is a lot of work and thinking. But the more that you can do this now, I think the less you're going to have to put in later, because you will have done all this reflection and all of this prep ahead of time. Like, so you're sort of getting ahead of things. And, down the line or next year, when you come back to that lesson, you know what you want to change and you know what you want to keep. I know a lot of this video has been specific to the lesson that I used as an example, which is one that I use with my own kindergartners. So I'm going to I'm going to recap what the lesson structure should be and different things you're going to think about as you use that structure to plan. What you have thought of ahead of time is, what do I want them to know? What goals do I have for their learning? How are students going to practice it and show me that they are learning and progressing? First thing you want to have in your lesson is an opener, an opening routine, right? Something that gets students in the musical mindset, that sets the expectation for class, that lets students know what their job is, and that possibly caters to the class's personality. So your class opener, a routine that stays consistent so students know what to expect. Your second part, you take your specific skill that you're going to teach, zoom out a little bit, something that's a little more broad than what you are about to teach them, but still opens the door into that skill that they're about to learn and practice. Next part of your lesson is the activity itself, the actual meat of your lesson, the content, the skill that you are learning, teaching, and practicing. So you've taught the thing, you've done the content. This is the third part of your lesson, right? So the fourth part of your lesson, the students need to show the learning somehow. And that can be whole class, it can be groups, it can be pairs. Without that to sort of tie everything up at the end, it's kind of like you're at the end of a cliff and like, okay, but now what? Like, those are things that you need to think about ahead of time. The last minute or two of class, sometimes it's also good to put the cherry on top of the sundae and have students verbally recap to you or to each other in a turn and talk fashion what you learned and practiced today, so that it just kind of closes the circle and ties up the lesson really nicely. You could ask them, if you had to go home and tell your family today what you learned in music class, what would you say? And they may not state the goal as precisely as you have explained it to them or precisely as you want. They may say, we ran around to up and down. Okay, all right. Okay, are they saying like the words that you're using? Are they recalling something meaningful for them? That's important too. Whatever they tell you, like, that's what stuck with them. Repeat, do it over and over again. Sometimes the closing routine is, again, sort of like at the beginning, where you have a seemingly like unrelated kind of thing where, okay, we're going to play some calm down music, or we're going to end with 2 minutes of gentle scarf tossing, or we're going to end with some light stretching to get students ready for the hallway. But that closing routine can be another unrelated activity, or it can be a verbal summarization, right? It can be calling students into line. But it's something that doesn't just chop and end the class like suddenly like, oh, okay, all right, great. Because they are transitioning back to a different setting, a different teacher, a different part of their day. It's helpful for them to kind of get that, like, slow your wheels down, let's move on. Let me know if any of these other ideas kind of latch into your brain and you want more information about that. I hope this video was helpful. I hope that this points you in the right direction. Lots of people's situations are just so specific that I feel like if you want to reach out to me and we can have an email conversation, that in a way might be a little more beneficial, because you may have some ideas going that I didn't even talk about here. So please feel free to email me, sarah@adifferentmusician.com. You can also DM me on Instagram. My handle is, at a different musician. But I hope you got some value out of this, and I hope that this does sort of give you a place to start. If you got value from this video, please share it with someone who could also learn something from it, or who also is in the same situation as you. Share. That's a really great way to support this channel without, giving you too much, without spending too much mental energy, right? That's something that I'm very conscious of lately. So share it with a friend, share it with a colleague. If you are brand new here and you're watching my videos for the first time, I have an awesome email list called the ADM community, a different musician. I am the different musician, but you probably are too if you're joining the email list. It is a monthly curated newsletter full of amazing content from musicians and music teachers, including myself, but a bunch of other people that I know either personally or on Instagram. The community is meant for people who are coming into music teaching from a different sort of background, hence a different musician. You should definitely subscribe. I'm gonna leave that link down below. It's fun to connect with all of you, so go join that. And yeah, if you have anything specific you want to chat about with me, all the information, like I said, is right below. I really appreciate you having watched this whole dang thing. And yeah, happy music making.